Hello everyone, and welcome to 7th grade Math Module 1, Ratios and Proportional Relationships. In this video, we're looking at Lesson 1, an experience in relationships as measuring rate. Our learning goal is to make sure that we can calculate unit rates. This will help us to master Standard 7.rp.2a, which is to decide whether two quantities are in a proportional relationship. Let's start off with some terms that you'll need to know. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities by division. Now, ratios can be used to represent relationships that are within a set. For example, comparing the number of green frogs in a pond to the total number of frogs in a pond. Or they can compare between two sets. So if you have a bunch of flowers in a vase, you could compare the number of roses to the number of tulips. There are three ways we can write ratios. We can write them as a fraction in simplest form, with quantity A over quantity B. We can write them using a colon, with quantity A to the left of the colon and quantity B to the right. Or we can write them with the word 2 in between quantity A and B. The great thing about all these ways of writing ratios is we read them all the same way. We would read A to B. Now, keep in mind when you are writing a fraction in simplest form for your ratio that you are going to need to divide by the greatest common factor. Now let's try an example. Write the ratio that compares the number of footballs to the number of tennis balls. Our word problem gives us some hints about how we are going to set up our ratio. Usually it will have whatever quantity A is before a keyword like 2, and then quantity B will come after. And the same thing happens here. So I would take my number of footballs and set it to my number of tennis balls. Well, there are 4 footballs to 6 tennis balls, so that is my ratio. Now again, when I go to write this as a fraction, I do need to put it in simplest form. So the greatest common factor of 4 and 6 is 2, and when I divide and simplify my fraction, I get 2/3. So our ratio in simplest form is 2 footballs to 3 tennis balls. Next, we're going to find some equivalent ratios. That goes back to our standard where we're trying to figure out if two quantities are in a proportional relationship. So in order to figure out if two ratios are equivalent, all we need to do, and this is very easy if they are written in fraction form, is to put them in simplest form. So if we, for example, have the two fractions or ratios of 3 to 4 and 12 to 16, all we need to do is put them in simplest form and see if they are the same. Now 3 to 4 is already in simplest form for us, so that's one piece done. All we need to do now is put 12 to 16 in simplest form. First, I find the greatest common factor of 12 and 16, which is 4. Now that I have my greatest common factor, I can divide 12 and 16 both by 4. When I do that, my simplified fraction is 3/4. So my two ratios then are both 3 to 4, which means that they are equivalent. 3/4 and 12/16 are equivalent. Now we're going to take what we know about ratios and really bring it back to our goal, which was to calculate unit rates. And in order to do that, we first need to know what a rate is. So a rate is just a type of ratio, but a ratio that in particular is comparing two different kinds of units. For example, you could compare words to minutes, in 100 words to 2 minutes. When we simplify our rate to have a denominator of 1, that's when we take our rate and we give it a special name and we call it a unit rate. We call it a unit rate because 1 is a single unit. So in order to find a unit rate from just a regular rate, which again is a type of ratio, is we just write our rate as a fraction first. Then we need to turn our denominator into 1, and the easiest way to do this is to divide the numerator and denominator by the denominator. We do not want to use the greatest common factor because we might not get a denominator of 1. Once we've divided our numerator by the denominator and our denominator by the denominator, we should end up with a unit rate. So if we look at that with 100 words to 2 minutes, we would not find our greatest common factor, but we would take our denominator of 2 and we would divide the numerator and denominator by that. 100 divided by 2 gives us 50 words. And the reason we chose 2 is so that when we take our denominator of 2 and divide it by itself, we get 1. You guys already know that fractions that have 1 as a denominator can be written in simplest form with just the numerator as a regular number. So when we get our 50 words to 1 minute, we would write that rate as 50 words per minute. Now, part of writing our unique measurements for both of our units is that we take measurement A, and then where the 2 part of our ratio would be, or the fraction bar would be, we would put in the word per, and then we have our unit that comes after that. Now it's time to take what we know about unit rates and connect it to our standard, where we are deciding whether two quantities are in a proportional relationship. What we're doing with this today is we're looking at whether something is a better buy, which you should remember from 6th grade. So what you do to figure out when you're comparing two rates to figure out which of them is the better buy is you are going to write them as fractions in simplest form, and then you are going to compare to see which one is going to cost the least. Now, they won't necessarily give you big hints in your word problems to let you know the order that you're putting these into your ratio, which unit is going to be in your numerator or denominator. But when we're looking at best buy, we generally looking at comparing the dollars per item. The item is going to be our unit of our unit rate, so it goes in the denominator. So if we were going to say compare the cost of our apples from column A to the apples in column B, we would start by writing each of those as a ratio or a rate with dollars over items. So in column A here, we would write our 19 cents per one apple. And since we already have 1 in our denominator, we are done our work. We have our unit rate. Our unit rate is 19 cents per apple. Now for the harder part. Now we're going to take our 3 apples for 59 cents. We are going to put the 59 cents over 3 apples. Because we do not have a denominator of 1, we can do 59 cents divided by 3. As you notice here, I wrote this a bit differently than on the previous page. Since we already know that 3 divided by 3 is going to equal 1, we don't have to write out doing our denominator divided by 3. And in fact, writing a fraction is comparing two things with division, like we said with ratios. So we can just do our numerator divided by our denominator to get our unit rate. Now the number I get in my calculator for this is 0.19666. The 6's go on forever. And money doesn't go that far. So I'm going to round this to the nearest penny. And when I round it, because there is a 6 to the right of my hundredths place, I would round that up to 20 cents. So this set of apples in column B are actually 20 cents per apple. And that's pretty close to what we had in column A. And you might not care so much when you're at the store, but the question asked us for which one is the better buy. And in this case, 19 cents per apple in column A is the better buy. So now you can try. We've got 10 pens for $8.99 and 25 pens for $19.75. You can pause the video here while you figure out which of those is the better buy. All right, I hope you did some good work, some careful ratio setup, and some good dividing. So if you set up your ratio for the pens, you should have had $8.99 per 10 pen. And when you divide your numerator by your denominator and round to your nearest penny, you get 90 cents per pen. When we do the same thing with column B, we'll take our $19.75, put it over our 25 pens, and when we divide $19.75 by 25, we get 79 cents per pen exactly. 79 cents is less than 90 cents, so our column B, 25 pens for $19.75 is the better buy. What does this video make you wonder about calculating unit rates? Write your questions down so you don't forget them. Then you can try to find answers online or ask a classmate or teacher. Thanks for watching, and when you're trying this on your own, remember, if you learned from your failures, then you succeeded.